All right. So I don't know who's on, but welcome to the first ever Quantum Terror live stream. And I am Christopher Moonlight, and I am here with Scribe Light and Joshua Millican. And oh, I'm hearing myself come back. What happened here?
Probably got your own YouTube channel open.
Oh, there we go. Okay, see, I'm already making mistakes. All right, so hello. We've got people in the chat. I'm so excited. This is like it's already happening. So why don't you guys introduce yourself? I'll start with Scribe. Go ahead.
Do I have a tab open somewhere? Oh, I see what's happening. I have my Twitter open at the channel link, and it was playing in my ears, so I thought you were still echoing. I apologize. That was my bad.
That's all right. See, it's the first ever, so yeah. This is gonna happen.
Sorry, I was hearing overlapping. Were we introducing ourselves?
Yes, introducing yourself, and I'll say hi to Keeverdom. I hope I'm saying that right. Welcome to the chat. Thank you very much for tuning in.
Hey, Keever. Yeah, so I'm Scribelight. I've been doing YouTube for 5 years, just a little bit over 5 years now. I'm generally do social commentary and or live streams of silliness or news. But beyond all that, I've been a Lovecraft fan since, my early teens at least, and I've consumed so much Lovecraft media over the years that hopefully I have something to contribute to the conversation here, and I really appreciate Christopher having me on.
Oh, I'm really happy to have you on. This is exciting for me, and it helps me to have someone who actually knows live streams on with me. So thank you for joining me. And Joshua Millican, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Joshua Millican, and I'll probably have technical difficulties at some point during this stream as well. So, don't feel bad, gentlemen. We're all in the same boat here. Most people know me from my years as a horror journalist. Primarily at Dread Central, where I started working in 2016, worked my way through the ranks, managing editor, finally editor-in-chief for 2 years. I went on hiatus/sabbatical when my son was born about 7 months ago. As you can see, I'm the best father in the world. I'm legendary. But I also have a book coming out, my debut novel. It's called Deeper Than Hell. It'll be out on June 14th through Encyclopocalypse Publishers. You can already pre-order the Kindle link on Amazon. Deeper Than Hell. It'll be the #1 search return, so check it out. I feel like there was something else I was going to mention, but it escapes my mind now, so I guess we can just leave it at that.
Yeah, well, it might come up in conversation again. Sure. And
I remember now. I just wanted to say that my book is primarily inspired by the likes of Clive Barker and William S. Burroughs, but there are aspects of it that are definitely Lovecraftian, because when I was writing my book, what I love is the fact that, the Cthulhu mythos and everything that Lovecraft created is kind of open for other people to contribute to now that it's, what's the word?
Public domain.
Public domain, yeah. So I did pull some tendrils in from Lovecraft, and it's definitely peppered throughout my novel coming out on June 14th. That's what I wanted to mention.
Awesome. I'm really excited about that. And I am, of course, as it says in the thing here, Christopher Moonlight, or Christopher Cooksey, Christopher Moonlight Productions. My movie is The Quantum Terror. So Lovecraftian, Jungian, Lynchian style, super low budget horror movie that we just had the premiere of at Batcity Scargrounds in Buda, Texas this weekend. It's also available on Zumo to watch. So if you can get the Zumo app on your Roku or smart TV or whatever, you can watch it right now. And it's coming soon to Free Movie Channel, Filmzy, and Box Brazil. I'm so happy it's going to be playing in Brazil, but it's also going to be international when it hits with Filmzy. So the reason that I gathered you all here today is that obviously we're all excited about Lovecraftian fiction and are familiar with just how much H.P. Lovecraft contributed to horror, how so much of what we have in horror, we wouldn't even be here today if it wasn't for so many of the ideas that he really kind of solidified. And we're seeing them pop up in our media everywhere. Most notably recently, of course, Stranger Things season 4 and Love, Death Plus Robots had a couple that, or actually three, even though they were kind of bouncing back from fantasy to science fiction. There were definitely Lovecraftian elements in there, especially The Vaulted Tomb. I think that was the name of the title. I keep forgetting it. And then, even to the more low budget stuff, like Charles Band is still doing Lovecraftian stuff with his Full Moon Films, and he's doing The Resonator, which I thought was a fascinating low budget film. So I wanted to talk about that today, and also a couple of other things like the emergence of AI technology, how that seems to be like automatically generating horrific Lovecraftian imagery. So I wanted to talk about that. But first of all, I wanted to. Not everybody is done binging Stranger Things yet, ourselves included. Scribe, you got to the first two episodes, so I figured I'd have you kind of give us a recap and maybe start us off with some of your thoughts on it.
Well, as I won't go through talking about the previous seasons or anything, but first season was great. You have a really strong idea, a really strong sense of a world building. Season 2 and 3 kind of, I thought, floundered a little bit, like they kind of ran out of ideas and had to stretch things out.
Uh-oh, you're breaking up.
Started off. Am I?
You broke up. You kind of pixelated for a few seconds there, but...
no, okay. Am I still here?
I think you're all right now. You're coming through. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Hopefully so. So season 4, it feels like a soft reboot in a way because they've sort of created a new villain. They've created a new scenario. They brought in some new characters to be the ones discovering the horror now. And because one of the things that I was worried about, and I haven't gotten far enough into the season, obviously, to know for sure, is that how many times can the Scooby-Doo team be scared by monsters after they've gone through saving the world twice now? And now they're coming across a bit more like the elder statesman of weird stuff in Hawkins, which I kind of appreciate. I'm what I'm noticing, and I saw this as well in Resonator, and we'll probably get to that. I can't help but notice all of the visual and stylistic Easter eggs that they're putting in there from the 80s. Eddie being Eddie Van Halen, almost a copy, visually and otherwise. The Mean Girl being Gem and the Holograms. The guy running the DJ booth in the skating rink, I think he was like one of the Frog Brothers from Lost Boys. And then, of course, you have all the horror tropes where they kind of made a combination of... so Robert Englund is in this season. I don't think that's a spoiler or anything. He plays a key character in the season. And the villain is kind of a Freddy Krueger because in a lot of ways, his victims... Again, sorry for anybody watching. This is going to be total spoilers for the first 2 episodes at least. So,
oh yeah, we're going full spoilers. Yeah.
So the victims go into a trance or into sort of a REM state, and then the monster shows up with a giant claw hand and sort of takes their lives away and everything in kind of a almost Life Force. If you see the movie Life Force, where they get the soul sucked out of them and their bodies just kind of implode. So far, it's been pretty good. It's been a lot of teenage angst, which Stranger Things has done a good job of so far, relatively speaking. The actors all feel very familiar. We have their relationships down as sort of a quasi-family. And so far, I'm intrigued. I was not sure that they could carry this story out much further. But so far, it's all right. It's all right. Everybody feels very grounded. And but I'm curious to find out how they integrate what's going on with the previous stories. I don't know if that's helpful to the whole situation. That's one of my thoughts on it so far in a high level view.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good recap. Thank you so much. Definitely have some thoughts on that. But Joshua, what's your impression so far? What's standing out to you? What do you like? Is there anything that's bothering you?
I really like the fact that it's gone so in the vein of horror. Scribe, just from the first 2 episodes, you can tell that they're really leaning into the horror this season. I really like the fact that the opening sequence kind of repaints Eleven and her powers.
Mm-hmm.
You see her kind of struggling to contain her emotions. So I haven't seen all of them. And obviously she's on a dramatic character arc, but I'm almost like starting to fear that she's going to become like a Carrie character. And I've never really been afraid of her like that before. So I really like it. I like all the horror elements. There's this one episode, Scribe, you haven't seen it yet, but it is so packed full of Easter eggs. They have the Changeling with a wheelchair up in an attic. They have Silence of the Lambs in a way that you just like, it's almost like on the same set as Silence of the Lambs. And then they have a great Halloween Easter egg where you got Judith Meyer's headstone. It's just like all for the 80s people. I really like that. One thing I'm kind of ambivalent about is the Spicoli character they've introduced this season. I always have mixed feelings about stoner stereotypes, being a stoner stereotype, but also hoping to challenge the stoner stereotypes. I like them. I do. I like the character, but it is just a little too much, But I'm glad that at least they're, anything where cannabis use is kind of like elevated as opposed to demonized, I'm all for. So just the fact that you've got characters openly imbibing in cannabis, I really like that. And Robert Englund's great when he does finally pop up. It really is as kind of a non-burned up Freddy Krueger. He's still using his claws. And you're absolutely right that this Vecna character really is a Freddy Krueger. That's kind of like what I thought the very first time you see him unfurling his claws and, the way he was standing off against Chrissy, I think it was. It just felt very much like one of the opening sequences in one of the very first Nightmare on Elm Street films. So it was great. In general, I'm really liking it. I do think that, seasons 2 and 3 kind of like got out into the weeds a little bit, but it seems like they're bringing it back around and it's really tight, which I think it should be. A pandemic, obviously they would have released it a year ago, but with the extra time, it feels like they've really trimmed a lot of the fat. A few kind of unnecessary monologues aside, I feel like the pacing is really, really good.
Yeah, and that first death of Chrissy was straight out of Nightmare on Elm Street, with her being pinned to the ceiling and the innocent guy sort of being laid to blame for the death and everything. So now the question I always have about shows like this, where you see that much homage, is that good? Is that good content, or is that just lazy writing?
I think it's good because it doesn't stand out. If you don't know it's an Easter egg, it still flows perfectly. It's only for those who know. I mean, if it was kind of like something random that only people who had seen horror movies from the 1980s would understand, then I'd be like, yeah, that was superfluous. That was, pandering. That was kind of lazy. But the fact that it still all flows within the framework of the story, you could be a millennial and have never seen horror from the 80s, and it's still perfectly fluid,
Yeah, I want to agree with that, because I have one of the things I love about Stranger Things is the fact that my whole family are fans, and I don't actually have very many things that I like that my family is also into. They don't care about my sci-fi interests. My older daughter likes horror movie stuff. Matter of fact, you got the Babadook behind you. My daughter is wild about the Babadook, and for her birthday, she even had me make a Babadook invitation where it's a cake. But when you fold it out, the Babadook's there. It says you're invited to the party, and then you open it up and it says, "Oh, and also you summon the Babadook, and he'll be with you forever." So she likes that stuff. But my whole family likes Stranger Things, and my 15, almost 16-year-old daughter and my 10-year-old daughter have no idea what these references are, and they are just into it. Anyway, it doesn't matter to them. It's just all part of it. And I think if you can work them in a way that tells the story, then, I think that's absolutely great, because strong writing and Scribes, I think you'll agree with this, having you and I before the show started, we're talking about Kenobi. Strong writing is so important and so lacking in so much of our entertainment. And I really didn't like season 3 at all. I was, especially like people would like talk, oh, the never ending story part was so funny. And I was like, that was like the worst time with all that to like break in with that. It just just destroyed everything. But despite all of that, I really still, and this, I think this is what really is the strength of Stranger Things and why it has such a strong following, is because the characters are so beloved. The actors do such a good job with them. So even when the story's at its worst, you are still, those characters are like friends. I know my daughters feel that way about them. They care about them a lot. They, you know, they talk about them and write about them as if they're people that are real. And I think that's Stranger Things' real strength. And so we get all this horror movie stuff. We get all this Lovecraftian stuff. Now, at the same time, though, my complaint, like you said, like the stoner stereotype, for me, like every once in a while, they'll get a little too idiosyncratic with characters. Like the basketball team is really super idiosyncratic. And it's like, I know they're supposed to be the 80s bully, but I was like, you could do a bit more with that. And the same with the girl that's bullying 11. I forget her name. You know, but at the same time, there are characters like when in the first episode, when Chrissy gets killed, I felt genuinely bad for her because I thought that they established this really kind of sweet rapport between her and Eddie. That Eddie was actually this compassionate guy who was kind of taking the edge off of some of her nervousness and making her maybe feel a little bit better. And you know, they're seeing eye to eye. And then that happened to her. And I was like, oh man. And it was, I'm a big horror movie fan, but that cliffhanger, that ending of the first episode really shocked me. I was like, oh, you know.
Yes. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, I was just going to say, not as a, you know, oh, it was like shocking what happened to her. Mainly I was scratching my head trying to go like, what are they referencing with the way she breaks apart there? But just the fact that I was, you know, like, yeah, she got killed. And that was, it was rough. I wanted her to survive. I you know, I'm not naive. I know they got to kill her, but I felt bad. Like, oh man. So the way that the story is engaging me so far is just like head and shoulders above, say, like Kenobi, where it's more like you're screaming at the TV going, how can this be so low IQ?
Yeah, one of the things
like Chris Young says key jangling, by the way, this you know, so. But anyway, go ahead. Sorry, Scribe.
I was going to say, the one thing that I've noticed about Stranger Things in places, and I know this phrase is overused way too much these days since The Last Jedi, but subverting expectations. Like in season 1, Steve started out, you think he's going to be this creepy, terrible bully sort of guy. And then he turns out he does a sort of character heel turn and becomes part of the hero group, part of the gang, a protagonist. And it doesn't feel put upon the audience. It feels like a natural extension, because if you look back at his previous behavior, he's not actually that bad. It's just that there was always that sense that he was supposed to be sort of like the stock villain of the teen set. And then with Chrissy, yeah, you expect sort of like, I mean, I would have expected the Angela bully character that's going after 11 to be that attitude that the star cheerleader would have. But then you find out that she's not perfect. She's vulnerable. She has all these internal conflicts, and she relates to the characters in a very human and genuine way, especially when she starts talking to Eddie. And you see that she's trying to find something and someone to connect to that isn't pretense, so she can get past all of her, you know, acting to feel better about herself. And then when she dies, you actually feel bad, because this is a character who actually has some depth. You have some sympathy for her, and she's not just the stereotype. Even though, like Joshua said about the stoner guy, this show does have the propensity to fall into blanket stock character stereotypes. You just don't know which and where, and that's a little bit uneven. But who knows? Maybe stoner guy will show some layers later on. Again, I'm only in the second episode, so I don't know what happens next. But then again, most 80s shows did have to have their stock stoner guy, so maybe that's just the joke.
I mean, he's like Shaggy on Scooby-Doo. But yeah, I really liked Eddie too, and I liked the Chrissy-Eddie relationship that they kind of teased before they kind of, you know, pulled the rug out from under us. And yeah, you know, I feel like the need to clarify just a bit, you know, I like Eddie. And when I was talking in the beginning about the stoner character, I'm talking about Argyle. I forgot at the moment that Eddie's kind of a stoner character too, but Eddie's really more of a fleshed out real life stoner. It's like smoking weed as an aspect of who he is. He's also in this Hellfire Club, and he's also, a class clown and things like that. So he's a fully actualized character. Yeah, Argyle's completely two-dimensional, and I'm a little farther along than you, Scribe, but he really there's no evolution that I'm predicting, but at the point that I'm at, closer to the end. But I guess the fact that Eddie's there is more of a fully actualized character does kind of balance it out. But yeah, you're right, and there are scenes like Christopher was saying, they're just kind of so on the nose. The scene where at the rink where 11 was being bullied by everyone, and
is that episode 3 or that's episode 2?
That's episode 2.
Okay.
That's episode 2. But and Mike and Will are just kind of standing there,
Right.
It's like, oh my god, this is so unrealistic. But then at the end when 11 hits Angela in the head with the skate, it's kind of like, damn, you just committed assault, girl.
Right.
It's balanced.
Yeah, and I never expect total realism in my entertainment, because I'm kind of on the side of David Lynch, where it's and Tom Savini has said this as well. He's like, watching movies, especially horror movies or sci-fi movies, is like dreaming. I mean, you do want a certain amount of logic to it, but at the same time, there are scenarios that, okay, that wouldn't happen in real life, but in service of storytelling, yes, that would be something that, that tracks well enough to tell your fable. I think is probably a good word for it. But other than that, like I said, the two-dimensionality of some of the characters, I know they're more callbacks, but I think that's the show's at the moment only weakness. And one of the things that I wanted to mention, like I said, is that Lovecraftian fiction is kind of become, I think there's almost two camps. There's the people like, we want just true Lovecraftian fiction, which I think for broader audiences is a tough sell. But peppering Lovecraftian themes into fiction for a broader audience, and I think that's what Stranger Things does so successfully, is, like you said, Joshua, the way that they put in the references and that sort of thing. And my wife and I, who know some of these movies, are calling them out, like the meme with Leonardo DiCaprio, we're like, pointing, like, yes, it's all there, but it's never in a way that takes you out of the story if you're my kids and you don't know any of these references. But yeah, like I said, sometimes they can weaken it a little bit if it's like the stereotypical bully or the stereotypical mean girl or something like that. But, are there, I guess my question for you guys now is, is it, a while ago, I wrote an article and it was on Movie Pilot, so it disappeared and I never saved it. So I'm kind of bummed about that. I thought I did, but anyway, it was this joke. I said, like, Lovecraft is going to become the new meta, just like zombies became meta, like, you know what I mean? Zombie movies would start referencing other zombie movies within them. Do you think Lovecraftian fiction is kind of headed that way? Is it going to integrate into the culture to the point where everybody knows what Lovecraftian is?
I'll start. I think there are kind of two sides to that. Christopher, when you're talking about the the hardcore Lovecraft fans, I think what they really want to see is the themes of madness, being brought right to the brink of madness. Because I think as a reader, you're usually right there with whoever it is, like, beholding the thing that's going to completely destroy, our brains and make it impossible for us to function normally from here on out. But I think the aspects of Lovecraft that are becoming almost mainstream and a bit of a shorthand in horror, the tentacles, the slipping into other dimensions. These are things that Lovecraft really kind of put out there, or popularized, at least. I don't know if he had other inspirations. So, I do see it moving away from the more cerebral, nebulous aspects of Lovecraft, which I think the hardcore fans are always going to gravitate towards. But I do see it, kind of like you're saying, I do see it becoming the next kind of horror shorthand, where you can quickly establish, connect to this whole mythos just by using a few elements.
Yeah, I think aesthetically, the market is becoming oversaturated to a certain extent with Lovecraft imagery and ideas and things. But then, like you say, there's going to be a separation between people like, oh, I recognize Cthulhu, I recognize tentacles, and then people who have an appreciation for the themes and the styles of Lovecraft beyond the monster and beyond just the slimy stuff. And so you're always going to have two camps that have like sort of a purist idea about what a Lovecraft story should be, and then people who just like that aesthetic more than necessarily the content behind it.
Yeah, those are both really good points. I also want to say just a shout out to Chris Young, who's in the chat, who agrees that there has to be a consistent internal logic.
Yes.
In storytelling. So yeah, it's interesting for me with Lovecraft, like with the Quantum Terror, Joshua, you pointed out like slipping into other dimensions, tentacles. The Quantum Terror has all of that stuff, but one of the things that I wanted to do with that movie was I am not a nihilist. I'm not even I'm not an atheist. I have my own spiritual beliefs, and I find that there are things in Lovecraft's wheelhouse that I really love, but I think there's an opportunity, and I hope other filmmakers and storytellers do this, to take the starting point, but then take it in another direction and see where it can go. Like I tied in what I would call I'm a big fan of Carl Jung, so I created a Lovecraft Carl Jung visual shorthand for my movie, which became its own vocabulary. And I hope that other people do that as well. I mean, Joshua, you said there's some Lovecraft in there. Was there any ideas that you took and felt like you ran with in another direction?
I think what I did more was, like I said, I was able to just make my novel part of the Lovecraftian mythos at all, simply by like using certain terms. I mean, there are tentacles. There's no alternate dimensions in my work unless the whole thing is just like a fever dream, which is debatable. There's that aspect of it, this fever dream. But what happens in Deeper Than Hell is just we acknowledge the elder gods, we acknowledge the existence of Cthulhu, and that's kind of enough right there. Saying like this story is happening in the same universe as these bigger stories. And that's what I love about Lovecraft, is that it's really accessible. It's almost like the way modern creepypastas are kind of open for everyone to contribute to. Lovecraft has endured so long that now it's reached that point. And I just love that you're able to tap into it, just by kind of acknowledging it. And the fact that people are so familiar with it, we've talked about before. Just by mentioning elder gods, people are like, oh, okay, this is that kind of, imagination.
Yeah, and Lovecraft, I mean, that all feeds into something that Lovecraft promoted himself and was rare to do at the time, was his Lovecraft Writers Circle, bringing in Robert E. Howard, Robert Bloch, so many other writers that came in, and he freely said, sure, take my stuff, do with it what you will. Robert E. Howard worked the Lovecraft mythos straight into Conan, and it's practically part and parcel. And they even exchanged ideas and characters, so it's almost like one of the first media shared universes. Marvel tries to make out like they're so unique in that, but it's not exactly a new idea. So yeah, you guys are doing exactly. But I do wonder, and it's just sort of a rhetorical thing, but I do wonder if Lovecraft had been more close to the vest with his ideas, what would the landscape of horror look like today, and would the sort of sharing of mythos and entities and things, would that even be a thing? Because I think that set a trend, especially with both himself and all of his associated writers, about the sort of the open source of ideas when it comes to horror and promoting the sharing of them.
Yeah, that's a good point about, because I'm a big fan of open source everything. I think as far as the internet goes, open source is what's kind of kept the whole idea of keeping the internet free as other entities kind of clamp down on it and try and control every aspect of it. Open source softwares and the whole open source movement. And it's a very good point. I never thought about that before. That Lovecraft really was the first, at least as far as I know, to do that. He wasn't as precious about it, and he certainly. For me, what's really interesting about Lovecraft in terms of where he came from is, there's obviously influences of Edgar Allan Poe, stories like The Great God Pan and The King in Yellow, which Chris Young and I were just discussing not too long ago. And, again, Bram Stoker, everyone kind of looks at the movie Alien and says, well, that's at the Mountains of Madness, just in space. And I thought, well, At the Mountains of Madness was even inspired a bit by Bram Stoker and Dracula, because Bram Stoker was kind of the first person to take the idea of you travel to a foreign land, you encounter something that is completely otherworldly, and then in some manner you bring it back with you. And it becomes a danger to the rest of the world. I think Bram Stoker with Dracula was the first person to do that. And then for me, the quintessential Lovecraft story is At the Mountains of Madness. But one of the other things about Lovecraft that, is inspiring people today, like you said, the madness, the going insane, the other dimensions. But one of the things that I think has been the toughest for anyone to translate is the idea of, Lovecraft usually described his creatures as undescribable horrors. Mm-hmm. So how do you translate that to film? Because it's certainly, I think a lot of people, myself included, have taken that as blank check to do whatever you want with some crazy tentacled, slimy creatures. But is there something missing? Is there something more that I think hasn't been done yet? Scribe, what do you think of that?
So this kind of bleeds into, I don't know if we're ready to talk about Love, Death, Robots.
I was going to just say that. It sounds
because I'd like, so there's, so the two items in Love, Death, Robots season 3 that you brought up, the first one being, let me make sure I got the title right here, Bad Traveling. So Bad Traveling is the one on the boat.
Right.
So both Bad Traveling and the oh, sorry. Oh, you can say,
I was making a joke. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So I have one complaint for both of the items in Love, Death, Robots, but I'll apply it to the first one, and then I can save myself some time later.
Okay.
When I was in college and I tried to explain to a friend of mine what makes a Lovecraftian story Lovecraftian, and of course, I was a novice then of anything, the phrase I came up with, and I don't know, I'm not going to say I take credit for this phrase, I came up with it at the time, but maybe it's used elsewhere, is personal apocalypse. Lovecraft's characters almost always had a first-person perspective, and that person would have to encounter something that broke their notion of reality. And sometimes it was a monster, sometimes it was indirect. One of the best examples I can think of is Pickman's model. You have this artist, this art critic, who is just, how does Pickman create or come up with these strange characters and these strange vistas and all this other stuff? And where does his imagination come up with all this? And then the last page he realizes, oh, he's painting still lifes. Oops, that kind of thing. So you don't actually even see the monster necessarily. You just have a notion that this guy's perspective has been changed. At the Mountains of Madness, you have a bunch of scientists trying to figure out our notion of how the world began and how existence began, and then they get completely thrown off. That element, I think, and I don't know if I'm controversial in saying this, was absent from both of these two stories, and that made them not Lovecraft. So, Bad Traveling. The monster we see almost from the get-go, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it is a known quantity in these characters' universes. They have a name for it. There's no mystery to it. It's not breaking their notion of reality or existence. It's already there. The main character specifically, his philosophy, his view on the world is never challenged in any particular way. He has a straightforward mission: keep this thing away from civilization. He's very pragmatic, very brutal in achieving that goal, and then he achieves the goal, and then he rows away. There's no point in the story where any of the characters have their notions of how the world is supposed to work thrown asunder. And so while aesthetically, as I was talking about before, aesthetically, you've got the fish monster, you've got the very dour atmosphere, you have the main character sort of in physicality speaking kind of resembles Lovecraft. Outside of that, though, I don't think it was a Lovecraft story, but I'm open to hearing your guys' thoughts.
Well, Joshua, did you watch all of Love, Death, Robots?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I wasn't thinking of that at the time. But it totally makes sense. I think you've made an incredible point. The one that I thought, we talked about vaulted ceilings, but one that I'm not sure if you would consider Lovecraft now, after hearing what you just mentioned, Scribe, is the Swarm. Because at first that felt kind of Lovecraft to me. At least the ending certainly did, where Galena is absorbed into, and then this new entity is born. But no, as far as bad traveling goes, you make such a really clear point.
Well, what I'd like to add with that is, again, Chris Young, who thank you for being in the chat, and I'm going to have him on the live stream sometime. He called it, especially with the Vaulted Tomb, or the Vaulted, what was it? I'm blocking it. Was it the Vaulted Tomb or the Vaulted Prison? Something like that.
Let's see. It was called In Vaulted Halls Entombed.
There you go. Okay. That's a tongue twister.
Yeah.
So Chris Young, he called it Lovecraftian key jangling.
Yes.
It's like, here it is. There's Cthulhu. Like, that's the reference. Cthulhu, right? And I feel like that's a big problem with a lot of Lovecraftian fiction, is like, ultimately it just comes down to, here's Cthulhu, or here's the Shoggoth, or here's the Deep Ones. It's like, again, Leonardo DiCaprio going like, oh yeah, I know that one. It's like, you go like, okay, I got that reference. It's cool. The animation on all of it is excellent. And especially with Swarm, the ending was Swarm. I was like, oh man, that looks brutal and chilling and awesome. But one of the things I noticed about almost every episode of Love, Death, Robots was you're actually getting and I don't think this is entirely a bad thing, but you're getting the same story over and over again. It is the same story. It is a group, 2 or more people. In one case, it was a group of rats. Come up against some insurmountable thing that either decimates them or takes them over in some way. The only episode that didn't do that was, I think, the first one, the 3 robots, which I hate those characters so much. I hate that. Like, it's like listening to robot versions of smug hipsters act like they're better than everyone else, and I was just like, but every other episode, it was pretty much one way or another the same thing. Now, sometimes that was really good, like I forget the title, but the one about the girl who has to, after her rover crash, has to walk back, and she ends up merging with the planet, which is Lovecraftian, but it was a cool idea, and I thought it was a well-told story. And a lot of them were well-told, but they weren't. They were coming right up against it. Somebody's getting some, like, not feedback, but wind noise or something.
That's probably me. Yeah, my microphone sometimes decides to pick up the background noise of my computer, and then as soon as I start talking, it starts to level out a bit. So I apologize. I don't have any control over it, unfortunately.
Oh, no problem. Sorry.
I think you're talking about a Pulse of the Machine. I think that's great too. I wish I had written it down, because I watched a little, Robots, Love, Death, Robots, Ending Explained, season 3. That one's actually based on a short story.
I heard that.
That's why it feels more fleshed out and more literary, I think, is that they were condensing a literary work. But another thing I wanted to mention, Scribe, I love that phrase, and whether you came up with it or not, personal apocalypse, as being kind of like a constant thread throughout Lovecraft. I love that, because I had never thought of it that succinctly before. But bringing it back to my book for just a moment, if I may be so bold, that exactly describes what the first person narrator endures. It is a personal apocalypse. It is a complete changing, yesterday, everything that happened before this moment becomes irrelevant, because it is a personal apocalypse where everything that was is destroyed and everything new is completely unknown.
Well, I wanted to offer a post show edit for the Invaulted Halls and Tomb to make it Lovecraft. I wanted to offer an idea because I was thinking about this, like I say, aesthetically, guys go into creepy place, encounter monster, go insane-ish, and that was it. And I was like, that's not enough. There's got to be something else. And so this is my if I made small edits to the narrative, it would have been something like this. First and foremost, the enemy soldiers taking the hostage, let's say, it seemed as though they went into the cave not knowing what was in the cave ahead of time, because they too ended up being victims of everything inside. So what I would have changed it to is that they are cultists, and they're bringing this person to the thing, either as a sacrifice or maybe to try to goad him into unleashing the thing. But that's all sort of backstory. The main point I would have changed is there had to be some dialogue between the protagonist group that indicated their worldview in a way that would be challenged by what they find in the cave. And the easiest thing I could think of was just religion in the broad strokes. And so what I was thinking is, before they go in the cave, I wanted to have one of the soldiers say something to the effect of, we have to be 1,000,000 miles away from home in order to fight over something that's based on a bunch of myths and hoaxes from 1,000 years ago. And that guy sets up that I'm the atheist. And then somebody else in the group says, stow it, we need to get on with the mission. And then we visually see that they have some icon of faith. Either they have a Star of David around their neck or a cross. So we have some idea that these two characters have established worldviews on faith and religion. And then when they encounter the monster, both of their perspectives are shattered. And what that would do to both of the characters in that situation, would there be some kind of conflict therein? Because really, Lovecraft isn't about the monster. It's about the human encountering the unknown and having to try to comprehend something beyond normal understanding. And if you don't have that character conflict of coming up against the thing, then you're just coming up against the thing. And it might as well just be a monster movie out of the 50s or something.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And I think what that does is, and again, this is what makes Lovecraft so great, and I think you really nailed the heart of it here, is just that, ultimately, I speculate that stories probably were born out of, the earliest days of, a campfire, that a tribe would gather around when everything else around them was pitch black, and there would be noises coming out of the dark. And nobody knew what they were, because so someone would tell the stories about what going out there and then coming back. Maybe a group went out there, maybe one came back with a tale of what's out there and how it does completely terrify them, because it shatters their sense of safety in the known. And I think what you're talking about is exactly that. Is, you have a preconceived idea. You go out there, it's completely shattered. You come back, and it's followed you back. You can know, and that's a metaphor for you can't get away from it now. It's at the bottom of the stairs. It's coming up to the top, and you have that amount of time to write your 30-page story before it gets to the door. Which, maybe that's a personal apocalypse ability that you gain, the ability to write 30 pages as it comes up the stairs.
Yeah, notebook found in an abandoned house. I think Robert Bloch did that one, and he was like somebody writing a journal about how the black goat of the woods was coming after them, and it just suddenly stopped when they heard noises outside. Yeah. Yeah,
exactly. So I think these are really good points, and for me, again. And my brain is stuck on, like I said, just how much my family's been enjoying Stranger Things as a family. And I think that adds to my own enjoyment of it. And then how I watched Kenobi, and it was just such an abysmal. It wasn't even, it's like, I made the point in a little mini review I wrote of it on my own personal Facebook page, just saying, like, it's like somebody, everything they know about storytelling, they learned from watching the Power Rangers, and they conceived of those stories at 10 years old and never matured any more beyond that. And that's so many stories. And then suddenly something like Stranger Things, which still has its flaws, just feels so refreshing. And it's not doing any virtue signaling. It's got a diverse range of characters without, just saying your identity is your skin color, your sexuality. They actually give them character and make them, and then it's not an issue to anybody. Nobody's bothered by it at all because they're enjoying the story so much. And I think that Lovecraft, talking about these aspects of Lovecraft that people are kind of warming up to but not quite getting to yet, I think there's still a lot of potential in not just being Lovecraftian, but what Lovecraft can teach us about storytelling. And that goes through the range of big budget movies all the way down to low budget movies, super low budget movies like my own. And this is my way of segueing into Charles Band is doing his Miskatonic U series. And I didn't realize it was a series when I first saw the movie The Resonator that he did, which I didn't realize was like one episode. So I just took it in as one movie. And I watched it going, this is definitely going to be awful. And then I don't know if you guys will agree with me on this, but I expected to watch it for 5 minutes and turn it off and, with an eye roll. I got sucked into it despite all of its numerous shortcomings. I don't. Am I the only one? Did you guys see anything in it that describes what you think?
Go ahead, Scribe.
Or Josh? Joshua?
No, go ahead, Joshua.
Well, I just wanted to let you guys know as we're diving into this, I was actually on the set of Resonator when they were filming it. So
wow!
I saw those awesome set pieces. I saw the incredible makeup effects on that butt-faced tentacle woman, and I saw just how awesome the actors were. I mean, that young cast, everything was like a single take with them. They were on. They all knew that material. Not only that, they knew it well enough where, the director, what's his face? Great guy in horror. The director, would be like, "Hey, give it a little more this sort of feel," and one of the actors would instantly be able to turn it around. And so I have no doubt that what's that?
Was it Charles Band directing, or was it someone else?
No, it was Billy Butler.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah, William Butler. But no, Charlie did come to set. He always comes to set. I've done a few set visits for different full moon pictures, and he always comes to set at least once a day, at least to just come in and check in. And sometimes he stays for a while, and sometimes it's really quick. But I have no doubt, because I hate to admit it, I haven't seen the full film. But, just being on set and seeing all the talent that was poured into it doesn't surprise me at all that it was better than you expected.
It was. Scribe, what did you think of it?
So, I mean, I just consumed that kind of stuff when I was a kid. Reanimator, From Beyond, Dunwich Horror. I mean, all the little stuff. And then, of course, you got the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society and their black and white presentations and stuff. And yeah, that 90s full moon thing. So as soon as I saw the full moon logo, it immediately sort of like a Pavlov sort of reaction. I kind of go into a mindset of, I know what I'm going to expect here. And so I just sort of open myself up to it. We're talking like demonic toys and doll man. Okay, I got it. Puppet master. All right. And so the production value, let's say, didn't faze me as far as like quality. What always comes down to in especially cheese, are the actors taking it seriously? Are the people making it taking it seriously? Even if it's ridiculous, even if the sets are made out of cardboard, the real quality comes through as if even if it's so bad it's good, so long as the people making it are taking it seriously and playing it straight. And yeah, credit to the actors. They put their all into it. I never felt like I was watching a melodrama per se, or anybody was just phoning it in. Everybody seemed to take it very seriously. And as I watched, sort of like Stranger Things, I couldn't help but think that I was seeing some homages. And maybe Joshua has some insight to this, I don't know. But there was one particular moment where Crawford is bringing in his college friends for the first time to see the Resonator. And they're all there and they got their computers set up. And I immediately thought of Prince of Darkness and John Carpenter, because you have this big cylindrical, mysterious object. You have all these college students getting ready to study it and analyze its output and all this other stuff. And so I was thinking, am I just out there? Am I just nuts in thinking that? Because it felt like almost like a situational homage. Because
But I was just gonna say I was actually there for that scene. And you know, they didn't say anything explicitly, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't, you know, something that they had planned and discussed, you know, while it was being set up and blocked and everything like that. It wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, maybe I'm just a nerd that way, but I've seen several adaptations of From Beyond before. I read the story, of course. I've seen a couple of small budget films in the H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival collections, and it was a lot more in depth than I thought it would be. I mean, it's such a confined story in the original that I wasn't sure if they were going to be able to. I mean, the From Beyond from the 90s obviously went in completely strange directions with it. It was great. And this had some, obviously had some great love for that version, because the original story has no sexuality into it whatsoever. Not really any slimy tentacle monsters impaling people. But no, I overall, I thought it was really good. The tag at the end when I was like, oh, of course that's going to be the Reanimator coming up, and I knew from the title before I even watched it that this has to be the first in an anthology, because you don't give something a subtitle like Miskatonic U without, you know, intending to make that the hub of many stories. So
I almost was, you know, my daughters when they were younger were into Monster High, so when he put Miskatonic U, I was like, was this like the Lovecraftian Monster High? You know, but some of the things that jumped out at me about it, and yeah, definitely, it didn't occur to me at the time, the Prince of Darkness reference, but definitely. And one of the things I didn't realize at the time was I somehow forgot that Charles Band or that Full Moon was responsible for the original From Beyond movie, which I absolutely, like, I came across that when I was a young teenager, and just, you know, boy, the embarrassment of riches that the 80s and early 90s was with movies, and we didn't appreciate at the time. But I was just like, what's going on here with these crazy creatures, and, you know, all this, you know, this giant worm sucking this guy in, and the way they did the, you know, just cut the frame off at the head so it looks like it's a, you know, it's not a guy with, you know, the makeup on the back, and, you know, here's his body. But I really just appreciated Charles Band's, you know, and Joshua, you were on set, like you said. One of the things that my criticisms was it was lit so flatly, like Disney Channel lights their like afternoon live action shows for kids, their sitcoms. And I was going, what's the reason for that? Was that just so they didn't have to mess around with setups? They could just grab the camera and move it. I certainly appreciate that kind of filmmaking, but it was almost, like I said, the script and, like I said, the acting was almost to a point where I was like, man, if they probably could have done a little more with this, with not any more effort. It feels like it was worth doing a little more, and it does feel kind of just visually like a step down from, you know, what Charles Band used to do, like his Reanimator and Doll Man and the Puppet Master movies and all that stuff. Like they were pretty well lit and pretty good setups. I never got the sense of, for their budget, that they were being ham-fisted about it. So it's curious now with digital technology that they would choose to go that route. Did it seem that way, that they just kind of had a single lighting setup?
Yeah, it seemed pretty advanced, actually. You know, they didn't seem lacking for anything. There were, you know, multiple cameras and multiple takes and everything. I will say, though, Charlie Band is being really ambitious in releasing basically a film a month. And that might have something to do with, you know, not taking the time to dial in a certain aesthetic or something. I also know that, you know, back in the 80s and 90s, he was filming over in where's Eastern Europe somewhere. He had studios overseas. And, you know, you're working with, you know, people from other cultures. That is, you know, different cultures bring a different aesthetic. It could be a geography thing, you know, what's available here versus what's available there. But, you know, it didn't seem like there was anyone cutting corners. All I can say is he's just so ambitious. You know, he's like releasing a film a month. I mean, I was on set and the movie was out 6 weeks later. So,
Yeah, if I had one complaint about the film, it was too sharp. It felt too much like videotape or like too digital. I don't know. There's that look that a theatrical presentation has that's sort of slightly not so sharp, grainy sort of filter over it or something. Like I just miss that. That's sort of how my brain separates something from cinema versus television. Is like, how sharp is it? Does it look like it was videotaped on a camera or through a digital thing, or has it actually been placed onto film? And that, I realize that, as you say, the production value, the time needed, et cetera, and the cost probably ran into that. But that was the one thing. It just felt a little like, if you have it too sharp, you start to see the seams where the glue is, if you know what I mean. And so you get away with a lot more. And I think you give the audience a little less to have to dig into and critique if you just fuzz the edges just a little bit. I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
I agree. I always like that too. I complain a lot that things look too crisp and too, like something you'd see on your laptop versus something you would see on a movie screen. And I think that's what kind of like I don't know, when you fuzz it just a bit, it becomes more real in that instance for some weird reason.
I think it gives the brain the opportunity to fill in the blanks on its own rather than just being shown everything a little bit. A little bit of extra shadow. I remember like in the original Reanimator movie, there were some scenes where the shadows just overwhelmed the scene, and that lent itself to the situation. I'm pretty sure that if they tried to film that on digital today, it would just take away all the mystery. So, I mean, again, it's just a stylistic thing. I like watching. You ever see the movie Kung Fury, that Kickstarter thing that was created? Oh, it's this great homage back to the 80s kung fu action movies. It's a romp, but the thing that they do to it. Yeah, they add this filter of you're watching an old videotape on every scene, and it brings there's something about that look that always just sort of it's comforting. Even if you're watching something that's scary, there's something sort of comforting about having that little window between you and what's going on to give your mind the idea that you're looking at a different situation, you're not looking at the real world. So maybe that's just me.
Well, I think that in some ways goes back to what we were saying before about the fact that Lovecraft doesn't exactly describe his monsters. You said letting your brain fill in the blanks. And I think that's what Lovecraft is intending, when he gives a few details, but then says ultimately it's beyond description. Well, that makes every person think of their own most terrifying images and the things that would scare us the most. And we fill in the blanks with these personal details that make it our own personal apocalypse.
Yeah, and I think the best Lovecraft pieces I've seen, short films and otherwise, they suggest the monster or the thing, but it really depends on the performance of the character. The character, the actor, really needs to sell that they're shocked, that they're seeing something they haven't seen before, that they're encountering something, or just a revelation. It doesn't necessarily have to be a monster. Like with Pickman's model, it was just the guy realizing, oh, that's a photograph he was drawing from life. You don't have to necessarily see the monster have it crawl out of the shadows. There just has to be that moment where the person's perspective on reality snaps, and you as the audience understand and empathize with that. So, like, if you could take Chrissy from the first episode of Stranger Things, you make that character in a relatively short time, and only in a couple of scenes. You see her in the gym, you see her in the bathroom, you see her talking to Eddie, and then you got the last scene. And in just like 4 scenes with relatively little dialogue, you have an understanding of this character, you have an empathy for this character, and when they run up against their horror, their demonic family or whatever else, and then you see the acting and the reaction to what happens there, that if you can pull that out and not have to show the monster and still get that same reaction out of the audience and in the acting, you can do Lovecraft without the monster. It's not easy. Don't get me wrong. I don't envy any filmmaker or artist that tries to do that outside of just the written word, where the reader can fill in the blanks with their own imagination. But it's possible, but it's very very tenuous to get it right, I think, and that's the challenge in a lot of these things.
That reminds me of that movie Bird Box, where, you know, because they actually did film a scene where Sandra Bullock's character sees the entity, and apparently when they looked at it, it just didn't look right, you know, so that's why you never see it, because when they tried to show it, they just couldn't create something visually that amounted to the reaction that all the characters were having.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like telling how the magic trick works. It takes away all the mystery. If you can believe the reaction of the characters to whatever they're seeing, and then you're left to imagine yourself. It's the show not tell, old rule.
Well, this is actually a very important point, and I'm glad you brought up magicians, because with I was listening to Joe Rogan talk about Aliens and how he got a 4K edition of Aliens, and he's like, you can see what's a matte painting and where it ends and where the real set stops. He's like, and it ruined it. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, yeah, James Cameron never anticipated that there would be higher resolution showings of his film later down the road, and making things too high definition, whether it be in your story or visually and on the screen, is like making the magician, have mirrors all around them so you can see him from every angle, and have him turn out his pockets and roll up his sleeves and like take away all the things that create the magic. Yeah, you may be outsmarting the magician, but you're also taking away the entertainment value of the magician. And it's and also, just a quick aside too, Pickman's model, one of the things, I never made this connection before, but H.R. Giger, when traveling with his paintings, was stopped at customs because they thought his paintings were photographs of photographs. And he's like, where do you think I took my pictures? In hell? This is aside as a connection here. One of the things this also kind of lends itself to is, I was looking at these AI things that have been popping up, these AI Google software, like I think it's called Disco Fusion, where people are typing in prompts that have it generate things that look very Lovecraftian. And some people were arguing, like, is this art or is this cheating? And I thought, you know what this is like? This is like looking at clouds or looking at wood grain and seeing what the imagination brings forth. And it's just interesting to me that it kind of, again, this like random prompt generator thing is lending itself to some very strange imagery, things that I've never seen created by an artist, and I'm interested in using it in my filmmaking. Oh, Josh, he's back. Okay, good. I don't know. It's just, I think this is a great conversation, because I mean, same with like David Lynch. David Lynch never wants to explain his movies because he wants you to fill in that blank. So I think that's a very important thing in storytelling that people need to know and understand. And again, I'm fixated on how bad Kenobi was. Like, here's a show that just has to explain everything to you in excruciating detail, redundantly. Hey, remember when we showed you Kenobi doing this thing? Let's show it to you 2 more times, just to make sure you didn't forget the first time. I think audience reliance, or respecting your audience and giving them the opportunity to complete the thought or meet you halfway is it's a quintessential part of storytelling.
Well, studios don't trust the audience anymore to be able to, solve a math problem by themselves. They have to be walked through it all, because, I mean, I could go on for a long time about current movies and media and things, and the studios having to handhold everything because they don't trust the audience to make the connections themselves. They're scared the audience is going to be thrown off, or this won't be consumable by all people or something. But yeah, I'll go for the independent movie makers these days more than the big budget studios, because they've lost it. They really have.
All right. Well, final thoughts here, if not meaning to be like Jerry Springer. Speaking of the independent filmmakers, I'm going to be a bit cruel, to be kind, or to be, tough love. There's a lot of independent filmmakers out there. I made my first movie, The Quantum Terror, and I already see how I can make it my next film better. I learned a lot from doing it. I think that's every filmmaker. But I am finding that a lot of the independent films. Oh, and yes, Chris Young says X, the man with the X-ray eyes, gets away with not showing the monster. And but anyway, there's a lot of independent filmmakers that a lot of independent films that I see, and some of them are released by Dread Central, some of them and other points where I'm just like, I have high expectations, and they're not being met even by the independents, and I want to support the independents. I think that the independents have an opportunity to step up. A lot of them aren't, and maybe that's just because there's a saturation of people who are, going, I can make a movie, but they haven't taken the time to do the work and earn what, in the past used to be. If you wanted to make a movie, you had to earn that spot, and it was a velvet rope that you had to cross. And I'll start with you, Scribe, and then we'll go to you, Joshua. What do you want to see independent movie makers do that they're not?
Oh man, I mean, I guess the same thing I'd want any independent any movie maker to do is to love the material you're handed. I mean, even if it's not anything you know about. The guy, and I forget his name off the top of my head, the guy who directed Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan, he'd never seen Star Trek before. But before he made the movie, he immersed himself in watching everything he could and understanding the universe and the characters. What we're seeing these days, and honestly, I realize that they're corporate backed, but some of these streaming series, they might as well be independent productions, but bad ones, because you keep hearing them saying, oh, we didn't bother reading the books or playing the video games before we made this thing. I really, I think the first thing you have to start with, you have to love the material you're working with. Even if you're not, or learn to, or at least learn to, and then you can bring to it not only the respect to the material, but the respect to your own craft, because that's really, I think that's a challenge for a lot of directors, is, seeing each movie as an opportunity and not just as a paycheck or something, or just wanting to get something out there as fast as you can without putting some thought into it. I kind of see it like, I know a lot of independent filmmakers right now. They're called YouTubers. They're called like true crime channels. I tried my hand at true crime videos 3 times. I did my trilogy, and I learned so much about creating a narrative, telling a story visually, getting across sort of a chain of events. And then as soon as I did that, I saw, when I watched other people's productions, I knew how complicated it is. I knew the research required. I knew the kind of editing required. And I said to myself, if I ever do another one of these things, I have to do it better, because I want to love this in order to put my all into it. And so, I won't repeat myself any more times, but I think that's what I want to see from filmmakers in general, but certainly independent filmmakers who don't have the studios necessarily and the executives yanking their hair every time they want to do something that's slightly outside their sensible lines.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's great. And Joshua?
Yeah, I kind of got to be careful what I say, because, having worked for a distributor, but so I'm going to talk about, distributors specifically, but Scribe, you don't have to repeat yourself, because I'm going to repeat you. You got to love it, and that's what's kind of most depressing. And this doesn't have anything to do with the distributor that I worked for, but I do know that there are distributors out there, distributors of horror, who don't love horror. And it's like, why are you doing this? If you're just in it to, you just want to be rich, you've got a capitalist mindset, at least sell something you love. Because if you don't love horror and you're selling horror, you're a used car salesman. You're someone who's just soullessly trying to push this off on someone else because you think you've understood their mentality well enough to separate them from their money. So if you don't love it and you're putting it out, you're a shell. You mentioned, you want to see people doing it, not thinking about a paycheck. Good luck. It doesn't happen anymore. And unfortunately, even these indie studios and distributors are acting like big distributors. They're looking at the algorithms. They're looking at, history. There's not enough predicting what's going to hit next. There's a lot of looking at what already hit and trying to catch lightning in a jar twice. And, just to kind of give one example, I was on a selection committee for a distributor, and I would just love certain films and we wouldn't pick them up because the thought was that they wouldn't recoup, the money that we would put into it to distribute it. And, it even got to the point where, like, a film we had passed on would make all the lists of like the top 10 horror of the year. And I would say, see, we should have grabbed that film. It's a critical success. And they would come back to me and say, still, we know how much that film made. And even though it was a critical success, even though this was on all the top 10 lists, that film didn't make that much money. So a distributor who doesn't really care at all about the artistic integrity or something because they're too caught up in whether or not they're going to recoup expenses. Yeah, I mean, you can't blame them, but at the same time, it's like, what do you do when, a distributor sees something and they agree that it's brilliant, they agree that it's worth the putting out there, that people will love it, but they're not going to do it because they won't make enough money off of it.
That's an excellent point. As someone who considers himself a capitalist, I do want to make money doing what I'm doing. I'm really with you on that because, first of all, if I just wanted to make money, there's a lot more easy ways to do that than getting into film.
Oh, yeah.
So you do have to love it. And I'm going to kind of add a little bit to that. And it's not just you have to love the material. Even if you're creating original material, you have to be in touch with who's the audience for this and be a part of that audience. I'm a part of the audience of who I make films for. I make films for me, but if I didn't, like this screening this weekend that I did, if I wouldn't have done it if I didn't hope that the people who I was screening it for were going to love it as well, because I feel a connection to them. The other thing too is love the medium you're working in. People say story first. I think story first, but actually medium first. If you're not writing for your medium, this is a conversation I have with a lot of people, especially people like, I've got this great script, but it's too expensive to make as a movie, so we're going to do a graphic novel. Well, the people who like graphic novels see right through that. They see a Hollywood pitch and they hate it because it's not being created by someone who understands the medium of comics, who can make the story all that much better within the medium of comics because they love comics. And the same with movies or TV or a play. I love going to theater. My daughters love Hamilton. We went and saw Hamilton. And I was looking at that play going, that is a play that was written to be performed on a stage, not to be a movie, not to be anything other than people who love theater. We're going to really enjoy how well the story utilized the medium of actors on a stage. So I think that that's very important too. And it's tough, to all those independent filmmakers out there. If it seems like I'm ragging on you, it's only because I want everyone to be successful at this. And I think that the big problem with media these days, especially in Hollywood, is that every aspect of the medium's full potential is being underutilized, even is like negative dimension utilized. It's just insane how poorly so many productions are. And I know that with the technology we have and the ability to do things independently, we can totally turn this around. And I am encouraged by Stranger Things. I am encouraged even by Love, Death, Robots, even though I think it's not reaching its full potential. I am very encouraged, and I will continue to watch that show as long as they produce stuff. I will be producing more stuff, both Lovecraftian and science fiction. Especially, I love the idea of grindhouse science fiction, which is something I'm working on, Scribe. So I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm calling it sci-exploitation. That's my buzzword. Anyway, all right, you guys, this has been a great conversation. So let's end. Plug your channels, plug your stuff one more time. I'll plug mine after you do, and then when I end the broadcast, I'll keep you on just for a second so I can say thank you properly. So, Scribe, let's start with you. What's your channel? Where can people find you?
Okay, well, my YouTube channel is just look up Scribe Light, and you'll see the little picture that you see right now, a little fan art painting based off of a classic painting. I presently, the pandemic changed a lot of the ways that I do my channel now. I got 2 set streams a week on Thursday nights nights at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, I do something called TED Excellence, where I basically do a MST3K watching random TEDx talks on different subjects and just seeing if I learn anything. And oftentimes I don't, but it is fun along the way. And then Sundays at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern, I do the Sunday stream where I pick some, again, random video out there or something on a particular subject going on in society, whether it's restorative justice or social emotional learning or something in education or business or something, and just take a look and see if I can learn something about the world that you don't usually pay attention to. And elsewise, I do other streams. I'm doing the Obi-Wan reviews on the day that those episodes drop. And yeah, I got a large library of stuff. My most popular videos right now are the 3 attempts I made at true crime, which get a lot of praise, and I appreciate that. Don't know if I'll do any more in the future because they are tough roads to hoe when you're all by yourself. But that's what I do. So take a look at that and follow me on Twitter at scribe_light. That's where you'll usually find me posting stuff about things and stuff. So thanks so much.
Oh, thank you. And hoeing ain't easy. Joshua, go.
Yeah, it was great to meet you, Scribe. I'm definitely going to be following you on Twitter and checking out what you do. Right now, for me, it's all about my debut novel, Deeper Than Hell, coming out on June 14th. You can get it on Amazon. You should follow me on Twitter, Josh_Millican, Millican. Right now I'm really just hyper focused on Deeper Than Hell, which I think if you're a Lovecraft fan, you're definitely going to appreciate. But I've also got a few other things coming out. Later this year, I'm going to be releasing a collection of the interviews I did while I was working at Dread Central. So over 50 interviews with some of the biggest names in horror. So that's going to be coming out towards the end of the year. I also just want to let people know, people who know me and follow me already know this, but I'm actually writing the authorized biography of Richard Elfman, who's Danny Elfman's bigger brother, founder of the Mystic Knights of the Oingo Boingo, writer-director of Forbidden Zone. And more recently, he's been getting back into filmmaking with the hopes of eventually making a sequel to Forbidden Zone. So I got a lot going on. And the best way to stay in touch with me, to make sure you don't miss anything, is to follow me on that Twitter. There are so many social media platforms that I decided to just choose one. And for me right now, it's Twitter, Josh_Millican. Let's be friends.
Awesome. And may I apologize for the barking. I hope that wasn't coming through too loud. The part when one of my daughter's friends was coming over, which set them off. Well, first of all, let me just say I find both of you guys really exciting. And Scribe, I'm really interested in learning more about what you're doing because you sound like a very intelligent person and looking to open up that knowledge portal more. Joshua, I've been watching you grow and progress with what you're doing over the years, and that's been really a thrill to see. And I take great pleasure in watching people grow and succeed and chase what they want to do, especially going into parenthood and also with the whole thing with like Forbidden Zone 2 and revitalizing so many great interviews that you've done. Like, I love that stuff. So I'm really looking forward to that. So again, I am Christopher Cooksey, sometimes Christopher Moonlight. My movie is The Quantum Terror, which is out on Zumo TV right now, coming soon to Free Movie Channel, Filmzy, and Brazil Box Brazil, sorry, and hopefully more soon. And hoping to do some maybe Blu-ray crowdfunder for The Quantum Terror. I'm also the author of The Making of Harbinger Down, which is a nice little mini coffee table book about the making of Studio ADI's Harbinger Down. And I've worked on other stuff. Oh, and also shout out to Chris Young, who's been in the chat the whole time. He does creepypasta on his YouTube channel for Brimstone, his upcoming Weird West, also Lovecraftian horror movie, which I am doing miniature effects for. So I am super excited about that. And I'm probably not going to be live streaming as often as Scribe Light, but I do intend to do this on a regular basis with more Quantum Terror stuff. Hopefully I can have you guys back. Maybe once we've watched all the new Stranger Things, we can talk more about it. And maybe other Lovecraftian subjects. I'm also going to be starting what I call the Hollywood is Dead live stream, which is maybe a little bit of like histrionic hyperbole for an edgy name, but I like the name. So gentlemen, thank you very much. I guess my first live stream, do I just say goodbye to everybody and then hit end broadcast? Is that what
Sure.
I do? All right. So we're ending broadcast, and everyone have a great rest of your day. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.